Welcome, everybody, to Quadrant 4 Politics. I am here with my co host, Riley. This is Matt talking, and today we have a special guest, Margaret, old friend of ours, here to discuss an important issue. We're going to be talking about whether or not men should have a say in the abortion debate, and if so, what that should be. Margaret took the political compass test, which we base our podcast off of, and she landed in quadrant 3, which is okay. That's the libertarian left. And Riley and I both have fallen to quadrant 4, but you've said before that you've been closer to quadrant 3, right, Riley?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we thought it would be appropriate to bring a female in for this. That way we would, not just be two guys talking about whether or not guys should have a say. So with that in mind, please comment, like, subscribe, listen, all that stuff. We're on YouTube and SoundCloud.
Share with your friends.
We
need more viewers.
And as always, we're going to start off with a grab bag question just to break the ice, and we're going to pick that.
All right. Just so everyone knows, this is questions chosen from the political compass test. We like to choose them at random and select one to do an icebreaker for the episode, get the discussion started. And as always, we like to say that the political compass test we do not think is perfect. We do not think it's law, but it leads to some interesting conversation. So without further ado, what is the question that was randomly chosen today, Matt?
The prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generations to find jobs. Strongly disagree, agree, or strongly agree?
Those are the options. Do you mind if I read it again?
Yeah, go ahead.
The prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs.
I don't remember what I originally said for this.
Yeah, I don't remember my original answer either. That's an interesting idea. I think that a lot of people do go to school, in order to better themselves in the future. But should that be the prime function? I think that's kind of part of the issue with the school system as it is right now, is that we don't learn enough about life, and sometimes it's setting us up for so much generalized stuff that can be used for jobs in the future, but it doesn't set us up for life. I think that a lot of us are frustrated with that.
I mean, I agree. I mean, it's one of the functions, but it's not the prime function.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I would say slightly agree because, most adults do get jobs, but,
yeah.
I mean, they should also be focusing on other things like life skills and stuff like that.
So, yeah, like I said before, they don't give you kind of a neutral option, and that's because they want you to make a choice, the creators of the political compass test. And that's kind of frustrating because also some of the questions are worded funny. I guess I would say agree, because whether or not that's to find jobs that come from a college education or just from a work program, I guess the end goal is to prepare the future generation, and a lot of what your life is your job. I don't think they need to teach you romance or religion or any of that. So, I think, I guess it's to prepare you for the future, which is ultimately jobs. That'd be my answer.
So you said agree?
I would say agree.
All right. I would say disagree, just because I think, yes, school should be used to preparing us to find jobs, but I think that people should have the freedom to search out education that teaches them and other things. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of religious people out there who would prefer to have their children go to school that teaches them nothing but the religion. If they're Christians, I'm sure that there's plenty of Christians out there who would prefer their children go to a school where they study the Bible for 12 years, which isn't necessarily something that prepares you for a job, unless your job is like you want to be a pastor in the future.
But that's also not real. I mean, even private schools, in order to give them a diploma, have to meet certain standards.
For most of them, you have to have a required amount of things like literature, English, math.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So, I mean, if they're going to go to a private school that falls within more of their doctrine, that's fine. But yeah, you have to have other categories that they have to meet the requirements for. But perhaps schooling should be more focused on, like we said, life skills and whatnot.
Yeah, what I would prefer school to be primarily focused on is preparing young people to live in society and how to work society. I think that it's ridiculous that in school we don't have like a law class that teaches us like what are the laws of the nation, because the way our government works is that we're expected to know the laws, and in school I never learned what exactly is tax evasion. That was never something that was taught to me, and yet if I commit that when I'm older, if I don't do my taxes in April, I get in trouble for that, and that was never taught to me in school. That was just something that was kind of expected that I would learn.
Now, do you think that could be a failure on the education system, or do you still just think that you disagree?
Yeah, I do think it's a failure of the education system. And I think I feel like the education system in this country is really flawed in that it spreads itself over teaching us algebra and geometry and things that aren't necessarily. Not everyone's going to be using those things. I think it would be more beneficial if we, at least general education, teach us things that we would all use and learn, and things that would, how to do taxes, what the laws are. I think, sexual education is something that would be necessary. Biology, learning about humans and ourselves and diseases and stuff like that. I feel like all that stuff is important. And if you want to get a job, if you're looking for education that will teach you towards a job, I think that should be something that's post-education, like a trade school. And a lot of people, there's a book out there that was like, everything I needed to know about life I learned in 5th grade, and that's because like everything after 5th grade is just kind of.
I think there was a similar book. I think it's the same title, but I think I learned in kindergarten.
Yeah. And it's like once you get to middle school and high school, you're just learning advanced versions of all the same things you learned in elementary school. So it kind of seems redundant and unnecessary. So I would say disagree for the most part. I think it's good that we learn math, and obviously I think reading and writing are things that are required
to be honest,
for society.
I remember taking trigonometry and geometry and calculus, and I don't think I've used any of it.
Exactly. So.
Yeah. So. I get what you're saying.
Cool.
There you go.
All right, so on to the primary topic of the day, which is, should men have a say in the abortion debate? What do you think, Matt?
Well, I think it's important to establish what we're talking about. So we are going to be talking about both just in general, should men get to say I'm pro-choice, pro-life, should they get to have a say in the laws? And then we're also going to be talking about individual discussions and, or individual, cases where, it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatnot, which the man and woman's role be there. For me, I think we discussed this in one of our grab bag questions. I am pretty pro-life, and you, Riley, are pretty pro-choice, and you, Margaret, are pretty much in the middle of everything, which has always been kind of frustrating, but it's why you're good to it's why you're good to talk to. So my main thing is that because as a person who believes that life does begin in the womb, and that's where my life began, I do get to have a say in it. And when I'm told by women or anyone else that I don't get to have a say in it, I feel like that, devalues where my life began, which it's like saying you don't get to decide, something about, the origins of where you came from. So that would just be kind of the basic of how I feel about the topic. I've been pretty frustrated before by people telling me that I don't get a say in it, because it's America. Everybody gets a say in everything, whether or not it applies to you or not. It's not necessarily true to what you do in your own personal life, but I do get to have my own opinion on it, and I believe my opinion is just as valid as anyone else's. With that being said, I can fully agree and understand that I will never know what it's like to have a child. I'm thankful for that, because I hear it's horrible. But I understand, that I've never been there. I'll never be in the situation of being a poor pregnant woman. But I think when you put life up against all those other things, and where it begins, I would say that, I guess that's kind of my point, is that it's something that we should all have a say in, because it's more important than just my body, my choice.
What about you, Margaret? What do you think?
As always, I'm kind of on the fence on a few things. So in general, I actually am pro-life. However, when you're talking about legality of abortion, I think everyone should have a say in it, both men and women. Now, when it comes to certain circumstances, whether men should be involved in deciding whether to abort a child or not, I think it really just depends on the situation. So I think we'd have to go in a little bit deeper on that.
We'll go ahead and go deeper on that. What do you think are the situations that...
I honestly think that it just depends on the circumstance. And again, I don't have any research. It's just my opinion. I think that it's just a normal thing, like a husband and wife, I think it definitely should be something where the husband does have a say, or boyfriend or girlfriend. Like if you guys have been together, you've established, a livelihood together. Mm-hmm. That is something that should be decided. And I definitely believe that the man should have a say in that. Now, if it's a completely different situation, like maybe an abusive relationship or maybe a one-night stand or something, I think that's where I kind of think it should kind of be up to the woman. Just because at the end of the day, she would probably be the one handling all the responsibilities.
Yeah.
So.
As far, let's say it is a married couple, and we'll get back to the legal part of it, mm-hmm. but let's say it is a married couple, and they're both responsible people who have planned a life out together and stuff like that. Like, mm-hmm. do you think it should be to the point where if the woman goes in for an abortion, she needs a permission slip from her husband?
I would hope it wouldn't come to that, because...
Well, I mean, if the husband wasn't with her and, she has a wedding ring, she's registered as married, and... She's
been married for 10 years or so.
Yeah.
I think it would have to be something, not necessarily permission slip, but, you guys have to come in together.
Yeah. Okay.
So you're saying you don't think it should legally get that far, but hopefully
I think I would hope it wouldn't get that far, more because at this point I would hope that a couple would communicate enough for that. But there are extreme circumstances, which is why I'm not really a solid yes or no.
And I would hope that also once you get into a serious relationship, you've been together a couple years or you're married, that you guys both have the same stance on what happens if we...
Which is another point.
Yeah, what happens if we get pregnant and we weren't planning on it. I had friends in the past who, both of them were pro-choice for the most part, but the male my friend told his girlfriend that if you got pregnant, I wouldn't let you have an abortion. And she's like, well, I'd be having one because I don't want a kid right now. We can't afford it. We can't take care of it. And he said, well, we'd figure out a way. And she said, no, I'd go get an abortion. And I watched them debate it back and forth. And I was just thinking, you guys should really, before you go back to that bed for your next round, you guys should really
have a discussion, kind of figure out
exactly. You guys should really be thinking about that.
I think that's something that people really do have to discuss and take seriously. I've always been very vocal. I don't want children, and I am pro-choice. And I've always said that to all of the people I have dated. So that is something that I think seriously should be discussed before you even start something.
Yeah, it's pretty much with every sexual partner I've ever had. It's question number one. Yeah, no, and I know children. That will you would you have an abortion isn't exactly a pussy dripping question, but
there's other ways to say it though. That's literally the first thing that I will say, because when you go on your first date, it's hey, so what do you want in the future?
Absolutely.
You could work your way up to that.
No, question one. Just so you know what my intentions are. All right, well, let's jump back into the legal aspect of it. I didn't give my input on that. I think we're all kind of in agreement on it that abortion is a society thing. It's something we should decide as a society, and men and women are both part of society. When it's something as public as that, I think everyone should have an opinion. As a libertarian, I generally support everyone having power and authority over anything that is public. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to private things, like I wouldn't tell BET what I want them to have on their network because I'm not the target audience and I have no stake in that. But when it comes to abortion, it's like abortion does affect men, believe it or not, and we should have a say in it. Absolutely, it's definitely not just a women's issue, even though that's kind of what it's been pushed as, and that's coming from someone who is pro-choice, like strongly pro-choice. It's been pushed as a woman's issue, but it's an everyone issue.
And we're also talking about, it was decided as a country with Roe v. Wade back in 1973 when the Supreme Court was all male, and it was decided by a vote of 7-2. So 7 men basically made the decision for the whole country that every woman has the right to an abortion up until the point of, at least until the point of viability. So if the baby can't survive outside the womb, then if it can't survive outside the womb, then she has to be allowed to have one, is what the court decided. And that was 7 men. There were no women in the decision making then, like there was during what's kind of known as Roe versus Wade 2, which was I think Casey versus Planned Parenthood, which revisited the topic. And at that point, Sandra Day O'Connor was on the court, the first woman, and she voted with Planned Parenthood. So even though she was a conservative choice for the court, but originally, it's mostly been men making our laws in the past, and if women want more of a say in it, then that's why in our last election, the House of Representatives is now has an overwhelmingly larger amount of women than it's ever had before. Yeah. So
diversity was definitely pushed in the last election. But let's throw out a hypothetical. What do we think abortion would look like in this country if it was just women choosing? Do you think that the majority of women are pro-choice, that they would vote for abortion to remain legal, or do you think if women took over, that the conservative women would take the lead and say, no, we want this, we don't want abortion to be legal, we are all pro-life?
I honestly don't think it would change, more because if you are pro-life, then you know that if you end up pregnant, you're going to keep the child. I really don't see anyone changing Roe versus Wade.
And from most of the studies I've seen, it's usually that women are slightly more pro-choice and men are slightly more pro-life. So, but it's not a drastic amount, so it's something that pretty much people are divided on, and it's unlike other things that have been hot button issues in the past, rights for other minority groups. This isn't something that the margins are really closing or widening. You can see it go up and down a little bit sometimes, more or less public support, but this is an issue that seems divisive, and it seems like it's going to remain divisive regardless of who has the say on it.
Well, Democrats largely have the female vote. Republicans have a lot of white female, but I'd say when you think of women, if you look at a random woman on the street and you're going to take a gamble as to what party they're part of, you're probably going to say Democrat, right?
If my life's on the line and I had to guess just a random woman, then yeah.
Yeah, so but I think that's a lot of people are single issue voters where abortion is that one issue that they vote on, and I feel like a lot of women join the Democratic Party because they are pro-choice.
I can say that for a fact. A lot of people do just for that.
Yeah. And you got to wonder why. Why is it that women tend to be more pro-choice, and why is it that men tend to be more pro-life?
Well, one obvious reason would be that women are the ones who are actually going through it. So I had a friend who I didn't have a falling out with her, but we just have gone our separate ways. We stay in touch, but anyway, she had a kid, and I said, so what was it like being pregnant? This was all over text, and she said, well, if anything, she said, it's made me more pro-choice. And I never got to ask her why, I don't know if I just forgot to follow up or what the situation was, but it was really surprising that, she brought this bundle of joy into her life that, like, she's posting Facebook pictures
So this
all
is
the
after
time.
she gave
This is
birth?
after she gave birth, and
Okay.
she said, if anything, pregnancy has made me more pro-life. And this was somebody
You mean
who...
pro-choice?
Pro-choice, yeah,
Okay.
I'm sorry. And this is somebody who, like, a couple years before, she was bawling because her friend had decided to have an abortion, but tell everybody that it was a miscarriage. And, like, she was, like, crying on the phone to me, like, heavily about it. And then she gives birth, and she decides she's more pro-choice. So something about going through that situation, that, like I said, as conservative as I am and as pro-life as I am, I will fully admit what the truth is. And the truth is that men don't have to go through the process of having, the kid or
Well,
making that choice.
apart from like the emotional part of there's also the physical part of it too. Like it can be a very hard pregnancy going in, and then like you give birth and your body still has to recuperate a year after. And like even if you I don't know, even if you aren't taking care of the baby, or if you put the baby up for the adoption, your body is still going through stuff. You still have to take leave, so there's that to consider too. And I don't know if that's something that men necessarily consider, and that's just because they're not going to give birth. It's not because they're selfish or anything. It's just something that you wouldn't consider.
Yeah, it's hard for us to take an outside perspective, like an honest outside perspective. I also, not speaking as a woman because I'm not, I don't understand, but I'm sure there's a lot of women who feel like there might be pressure put on them in society to be a caregiver, to produce children or something like that. And that might be the fault of men, that we might look at women that way. It might just be put it like just part of our society that we need to work past. That some men might see women as they're the ones who are supposed to produce the babies, and that some of the worst men out there probably think that that's all they're good for. So women, by standing up and supporting abortion, that's kind of like their stand against that idea, that misogyny.
And it's not necessarily like, let's kill all the babies. It's more like, hey, I just want some option. Like, I don't want to get stuck if something does happen.
Absolutely. Well, that's my stance on abortion. Is the reason why I think it should remain legal is because I think it should be a personal decision. I think if you're against abortion, that's totally fine. Just don't have one.
Yeah, nobody's forcing.
Oh my gosh.
Well, no, so that's my thing. I think it should definitely remain pro-choice, and if you do happen to be pro-life, it's forcing you to.
When it comes being a libertarian, I like saying that a lot.
You do, and it drives me crazy. But that's all right.
We need to do a count of that on the episodes. But I think when it comes to issues where the country is so divided, and I've looked it up several times, like the country is like 50-50 on abortion. Like they are fucking split down the middle.
But that's my question, and this is what I don't quite understand. So is it, and this is just me not really going too much into it. Now, if you're pro-life, do you like just don't want to make abortion legal for anyone, or is that just like your personal?
So one of our grab bag questions before we pulled it, and the question was, like abortion should be illegal in all circumstances, or no, it was except when a mother's life is in danger, abortion should be illegal. And there's what the question's asking and what it's really saying. So am I saying like except for a mother's life being in danger, do I think that there's no other circumstance? Like, I don't want to be that rigid about it, but I am going to say like, 99% of the time, if a mother's life isn't in danger, I would support the woman carrying it to term. And pro-choice people will throw out the rape argument, the incest argument, and those make up such a small fraction of the abortions that actually happen that if you just took that out of the debate, they don't have a lot to argue with, because it's such a small number. And even if all the pro-life people suddenly said, okay, fine, we're fine with rape, incest, mother's life, then we'd still be talking about like 95% of the abortions that occur. Most of them are convenience abortions. And as I think it's 1 in 3 pregnancies end in um, in an abortion being described as, you know, intentional willingly, because abortion can also be described as like a miscarriage, has traditionally been described that way. The way I'm using it here is, you go into the clinic, you get it done. So 1 in 3 pregnancies ending that way. And so for a person who believes that, life starts at conception and ends at death, like, I don't see that. I'm not saying I see everything as black and white. Somebody asked me once if I had to choose between 5 fetuses and a 2-year-old, what would you choose? And I said I would choose the 2-year-old. So I'm not saying that brand new embryo is the exact same thing as a 25-year-old in their prime, but I am saying it is part of the process of life. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, and I also think scientifically, when you end that process, you cut a life short. And all other circumstances aside, that's the biggest part. And so that's what my argument is.
But you would overturn Roe v. Wade. Yeah, ideally, you would like abortion to be
that
illegal.
Would be my question.
Yeah. So
Trump said he was going to create a court that was all pro-life, and they would overturn Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, and that's not going well for him, because Kavanaugh's already voted with abortion groups twice.
Yeah. But for you personally?
For me personally, the thing is culture needs to change a lot before that happens. And I don't know that we're going to get culture to change, because we live in a society of do whatever you want, whatever makes you happy, whatever makes you feel good. And until we could get that to change, I don't know that overturning Roe versus Wade is going to do anything except cause chaos in the street. Would I like that to happen eventually? Yes. Do I think it's ever going to happen? Absolutely not. I think Roe v. Wade will always be on the books. I think he could fill the court with all 9 justices, and I think they could all be very conservative, and I think you probably still would not have Roe v. Wade overturned. And even if you did, you would see Congress enacting laws that make it okay, or make it law. So I don't think it's going anywhere. Would I like it to happen? Sure. Would I like people to, instead of having an abortion, not get pregnant? Absolutely. Or carry out their pregnancy? Absolutely. But as far as overturning Roe versus Wade, I mean, it's just something that sure I'd like, but I guess I don't see happening.
Real quick before we go back into the men having a part in the decision, the only reason, or one of the main defenses that I have for being pro-choice is that in a topic that the country is so split on, like, evenly, I always veer on the side of less government, because I think government, it, for the most part, doesn't make decisions very well. They don't spend money very well. And if abortion becomes illegal, half the country will be unhappy with that. And also the country is going to be spending a lot of our tax dollars trying to regulate it, trying to enforce it, deciding what to do with people who do illegal abortions. And it's just, I don't think that's worth our time or money for that.
And as a person who leans libertarian and is not self-described like you, but on the compass I lean libertarian, I would say that government should have a few jobs, which is to protect the welfare of the people and our safety, and run the military. And I would say that under people would be, or under the definition of people would be, a fetus.
Well, that was part of my idea. Is, like I said, it's something that the country's so split on, in that half the people in the country disagree that, you know, an embryo or a fetus is a person. So that's why, that's my whole, like, that's half the argument is, if it was, like, the majority of the country was like, yeah, that's a person inside there, then I'd say, yeah, it should be illegal because people agree on that. But something that the country's so split on, I think the less government is always the side towards, worth veering towards. But, getting back into the man having a decision in the decision to get an abortion, I fully support women getting an abortion on their own without having the men's input. I think a responsible woman and a respectful woman will go to the man that she was with, especially if they're in a relationship or married, and have that discussion with him. But in the end, I think it should be the woman's decision, because it's her body. I know that's a cliche term, her body, her choice, but I do think that ultimately she's the one who has to push that thing through her body, go through all the pain and the labor and the recovery. And if the man wants to have a child, he can do it with another woman. You know, obviously that's something that people should discuss before they even get married. And it's, I don't know, I think the man should have a say in the fact that the woman should value his opinion, but in the end, I think it's her choice.
And that's kind of why I think it shouldn't ever, like, get to the point where it's, like, required for, like, oh, the man has to be there. Because then that just opens up way too many circumstances where it's like, well, does he really have to be there? Like, what if, you know, it's an unhappy marriage? Or there's so many different circumstances as to, like, I would hope the woman would go to the man if they're in a relationship, but apart from that, it isn't really.
And it's you know, it's very true. Like one night stands that you brought up. It's like you're not gonna find a lot of times that guy's not gonna call you back.
Yeah. So why is this something that we should know? Like, that's just gonna open up a whole other can of worms. And it's just, you know,
then why don't we just not have one night stands?
That's a whole different topic.
Well, it's kind of not. My point is that if, you know, we're talking about personal responsibility, then we shouldn't have so many unwanted pregnancies. Like, use protection, and also realize, I love abstinence only education, because this is what I believe it is. It's the idea that only abstinence is going to stop you from being pregnant. Nothing short of that is going to prevent pregnancy. I'm not saying only teach abstinence.
But that's when you say abstinence only education, you are implying that they aren't teaching them anything else.
Well, but I'm using it in my own terms.
No, when I took sex ed, you know, it was we learned all about condoms and diseases and all sorts of stuff, but it was always like strongly told to us, abstinence is the only way to avoid STDs and pregnancy. So sex education is fine as it is.
I wasn't suggesting changing it. I'm saying to teach people not only about abstinence. I'm saying to teach them that only abstinence is going to stop them from getting pregnant.
Well, like,
sure.
People know that. Like, there's no 100%
sure way.
Well, there's I could argue that people know that because there are a lot of people who don't go to school, like their parents pull them out, or they pull them out of sex ed specifically. And there's a lot of kids who grew up really not knowing anything about sex, and it's really unfortunate. You know, it's there's a Reddit page that I found recently called like Incorrect Women's Anatomy or something, and it's like all these women find like posts by incels, you know, involuntarily celibate guys, and it's just like how they think a woman's body works, and it comes up with these really comical images, and it's just a lot of it's really ridiculous, and it just goes to show that there's people out there who really don't know anything about a lot of stuff when it comes to sex, and that's really unfortunate because you know, they might think that there's people who think if you have sex upside down, like if the woman's on top, she won't get pregnant because the cum can't get inside of her, and that's just wrong.
Same with the pull-out method.
Yeah,
I knew somebody, and Riley, you knew the same person who believed that she said every time she said she's always used the pull-out method, and she had 2 kids, and she said those times she didn't, but every other time it worked, and I'm just thinking of her rolling those dice. Like, one of these days it's not gonna work. Yeah. Like, even if he does pull out, you know, there's still the pre-stuff. So
yeah. You brought up something earlier that I wanted to discuss. You brought up personal responsibility, and you said that abortion being illegal would make people more responsible. That abortion is just an easy out. But I disagree with that because I think when it comes to personal responsibility, like having an abortion isn't just something all willy-nilly. It costs a shit ton of money, and a lot of times women struggle with, you know, the fact that they killed a potential child, and that's a hard thing to go through. So yes, having a child is definitely more work and more of a struggle than having an abortion, but I still think that personal responsibility lies there. And having sex is always a personal, like, you have to be responsible with it, because if you're having sex with anyone, you're going to get all sorts of diseases, and AIDS isn't a death curse anymore, but you got to take like fucking 10 pills a day or some shit. And that's not worth it, man. It's not worth it to get AIDS.
So how about the fact that like 100 years ago, or 150 years ago, like, somehow the world survived without abortion. Like,
well, things have changed.
Yeah.
Like, health has gotten better, so people live longer. The world is massively overpopulated right now.
if you want to use it as a population control argument,
like,
then sure. But
abortion still happened. It was just more like, it wasn't something that was widely talked about.
I don't know, like,
And
how
if
it could have been done safely.
Oh, it was
Well, that's
never
the
done
whole
safely.
point. If it's criminalized, women will continue to do abortions.
Yeah, it's not going to
you know?
stop abortion.
Actually,
Not,
I've
not literally coat hangers,
those
but you
old
can use like saline solution.
yeah, those
and
old
shit.
like back alley, cases from before Roe versus Wade. A lot of them have been exaggerated for that point. Now, would it happen? Of course, but I don't think it would happen to every single person who was gonna otherwise have an abortion. But again, that's why I say, like, do we take away Roe v. Wade? Like, I think we would have to have more of a culture of responsibility, and I think we're moving further away from that. I think like I said, we're moving to where now you have all the options to do whatever you want, and you don't have to take any responsibility for anything anymore. And that's the culture we live in, and that I don't think it's going to be turning around. Because people are addicted to their own pleasures, their own desires. So,
well, like you said, the abortion isn't. You say that they're not taking responsibility for themselves. I think abortion is it's not an easy thing, and also the people who are having sex with everyone all willy-nilly and not being responsible, those are the ones I don't want having children. So it's like abortion should be available to those people.
I think it's kind of, you keep saying it's like an easy way out, kind of. It's not an easy thing to do, just to get an abortion, because there is like the mental toll and everything.
Well, there's women who've had like 10 of them.
Yeah, but that's like a very small amount.
Yeah, if you're going to use that argument, you have to let people use the argument of rape babies and for the mother's health.
Yeah, so, but like, think about it this way, like, by not having a child, you potentially don't have a child living in poverty, or you don't have a child that's in, and not an orphanage, what do you call it here? Social services all the time. Mm-hmm. You don't have a child like having to rely basically on the government for food.
Instead, we just kill it. Yeah, I understand. I mean,
I'm just saying, like,
that's what it is. I mean, and that's what the argument is for women who are poor or not ready, is that we are determining what the life of this child is going to be before we ever give it the chance to live. And in no other circumstance does that make sense, except, the argument that pro-choice people throw out that, well, if this happens, then, their life's going to be crappy. Like, okay, so if a kid gets his leg bitten off by a shark, he's going to have a harder life, Do we just put him to sleep, or, do we go along with the circumstances that are already there? I mean, that's not the best example, but my point is, like, life happens. Life's not always going to be easy, but I think abortion greatly devalues it.
Let's try to get back on topic a little bit. Something that I wanted to talk about as far as the men things go. What about what I learned today is called a financial abortion, which is where the man has an opportunity to opt out of paying child support. So a woman, this is with the presumption that abortion is legal. The woman has abortion as it is right now. The woman has the sole choice to get an abortion or not. Regardless of if the man wants the baby or not, and the woman decides to have it. and she decides to go after him for child support, it's not automatic. The woman has to go after the guy for child support. Mm-hmm. But if she does, that man is required to pay child support for 18 to 24 years, 18 to 26 years under Obamacare, I think. After 18, if the child goes to college, the woman can go to the courts and ask for longer child support because the kid needs support through college. The man has no choice but to give up to 40%, up to like 50% of his income to this woman because of the child. And the financial abortion idea is that a man can opt out of that. He says, I didn't want a child. I don't want to pay for this child. And so therefore he doesn't have to pay any child support, but he also loses all of his parental rights. That child is not his. What do you guys think of that idea?
I think it's absolutely disgusting. That eliminates any responsibility from the man's side. I think it's the equivalent to, except more disgusting, I would say, than the idea of, the women taking her route out by having an abortion. I think that's just, and also, how does that not put a woman in a corner to like, have this baby or I'm not going to help you out with it? Now, one thing I would say is that child support needs to be rethought, because there's lots of like dads who, you're right, have to give a lot of their money to the mom. And then when they have time with the kids, it's like, they want to go out and buy them stuff, do stuff with them. But it's like, I'm already giving half the paycheck to your mother, It's like, I think there should be a, child support should be reworked to where, the dad gets to kind of use some of that money for when he's with the kid. And
well, that is how it works. If the dad has partial custody of the child, like if he gets on the weekends, obviously he pays less. So they do structure it. The way child support is done is it depends on how much custody of the child the secondary parent has, because it can be the other way where the woman's paying child support because the man is the primary caretaker. But it depends on how much custody that person has, and also what his living situations are, how much spare income he has, because they take a little bit, not a whole lot, but they take a little bit of consideration into your living expenses, but then they try to get as much as they can. The courts do, at least. Mm-hmm. And if you have a really good lawyer, you can fight that, but most of the time you just have to bend over and take it.
So would that not give a woman another reason to have to consider abortion? Because this guy says that if I'm not going to have the baby, then I'm not going to get any help, even though he was there to help make it.
Well, she also has the choice to have the abortion. But I want to hear what Margaret thinks.
I actually am kind of for that, strangely enough. I think especially in situations where, I hate this, it's going to depend on the situation for me. I think that, yes, if it's just like you're not having in a relationship, you're just kind of briefly together, most definitely no, a guy should not have that responsibility. It was not put under the expectations that this was going to happen. It was a surprise. A woman should have the choice of abortion or not, and same thing with the guy. He should have a choice of financial abortion or do child support.
So a woman who's against abortion has to go it alone because the guy wants to.
Because at the end of the day, it is, she decided, if they already discussed it, they know that he doesn't want children, he doesn't want any of this. He already made it clear. Then why should there be something where he's suddenly responsible? She decided to have a kid.
She also has, if she's a pro-life person, she doesn't have to keep the kid. She can still go through with the pregnancy and give it up for adoption.
Yeah.
Also, there's my opinion is I'm a huge supporter of the financial abortion idea, and there's several reasons why. First of all, if a man doesn't want to be a father, it's going to be taken out on the kid. That means the kid might have to grow up with instances of the father saying, "I never wanted you," or something like that, and that's
I'd rather wring him dry for the money and give it to the mom.
Well,
and maybe she'll find him a nice
daddy. The thing
is
that if you're asking someone for child support, then they by law have a right to see the child and be part of its life, and say they're paying child support. So they do want to be there a little bit, but one night they get drunk and say, "I never fucking wanted you," or something like that. All of a sudden, that's really scarring for the child.
I also think that Sorry, finish your thought.
Well, like if they never knew their father, you know, they would know their father didn't want them, but they didn't have to go through that scarring experience of something like that. Also, there's instances where a woman will rape a man and not get, you know, there's so many instances of men raping women where the man doesn't get in any trouble because there's no way to prove it. There's the same way in reverse where a woman can rape a man, there's no way to prove it. But like that, a rape occurred, the consent was taken away, but a baby was still delivered, and the woman can still get child support from that man, even though that he was raped, you know. And I think that kind of shit's dark.
I think would also be a very small amount of what we're talking about.
The consent can get taken away at any moment. At the last moment, the guy will be trying to pull out, be smart or something like that. All of a sudden, she wraps her legs around him, and he fucking explodes in her vagina.
I honestly think that I would hope it would never get to the point where like someone's demanding financial support from. Well, it happens all the time, to be honest. Okay, I would hope it would get to that point where, in a perfect society, like if this person does not want to be involved in their children's life, it's very tragic. But at the same time, it is someone's decision. I personally don't like the idea of like someone suddenly like lifting up their hands and saying no, but in instances, again, like one night stands or stuff like that.
And there's nobody's saying that it's good of the father to do that.
Oh, it's a terrible
he's a
thing.
Deadbeat dad. That's the definition
but
of a deadbeat
at the same
dad.
time, it is the same. For me, it comes down to free will.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing as should a woman have a decision whether to have an abortion or not? Yes. Should a man decide to be involved or not? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. It blows my mind away just how much you guys are just saying like a guy makes a baby and just should be able to just
indifference. And for me, it's circumstance.
Well, it's also under the presumption that abortion's legal. If abortion was illegal, I would probably change my opinion a bit.
Well,
because I thought it was called a male abortion before I found out it was called a financial abortion, and it's the man doesn't have a choice in whether it gets an abortion or not. The woman can get an abortion if the guy wants the child, or the woman can keep the child if the guy wants an abortion. I just don't think that's right. I think it's wrong.
I don't think it's right either.
Because of entrapment. You've heard about the NBA players and the NFL players who think a woman loves them, but then the woman turns out that she just wanted her hand in his pocket for the next 18 years. So she sleeps with them. You've heard of the whole syringe, turkey baster, where they suck the cum out of the condom and put it in their vagina. You've heard of those things before because it's like, if you have a baby with a man, it's you can go after that man for the rest of his life, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think that also is very that would have to be evaluated, because I wouldn't want it to get to the point where any man would be like, well, no, I never wanted this. Like if it's clear that they're in a relationship for a few years, whether it be married or together, then yes, there should be some kind of responsibility. That would be the only exception that they have.
I also think that there's suicide is the highest among straight white men for some reason, and I think that would just make the suicide rates go up. I know if the situation happened to me where someone lied to me about being on birth control or something like that, and they ended up having a baby, and I got a child support bill in the mail, the first thing I would do is put a bullet in my head, because I don't want to live like that. It's not worth it. I know that might be dark, and I apologize.
So would your idea of financial abortion would be like in general for everyone, or would it be something more like depends on the situation, or are you just in general in general
for the most part? Yeah. I really have a hard time with the government forcing anyone to do anything with their finances or anything. Because in the end, they're gonna try to find ways to find loopholes in it. They're gonna run away, from the country. It's gonna ruin their lives, and if they decide to become homeless, all of a sudden it's a burden on the economy. It costs taxpayer money to try to enforce that. I just see so many negative things to preventing people from doing things, like for the government controlling people's lives.
What about in a situation like divorce? They get divorced and they have 3 kids.
That is honestly, I haven't put a whole lot of thought into that. And in Sweden, where the law was, I'm not sure if it passed or not, but Sweden was the first country to bring out the idea of financial abortion. Mm-hmm. They actually had a thing where the men had to decide within the first 18 weeks of pregnancy. So after 18 weeks, they couldn't make the decision anymore. If they didn't opt out, then they were stuck in paying child support if the woman went after them for it.
So what if she just hid the fact for 18 weeks?
Well, that's something that they could try to lawyer.
Well, I would encourage all women to do that in Sweden.
Well, see, that's I have a hard time with that too, because if you say that we man, it's man, you're saying don't trust women.
Yeah, that's yeah.
And that's I don't know what to think about really have a hard time with the idea that you should be responsible with who you have sex with and all that stuff, but it gets to a point where it's like someone can be really crazy and go out of their way to make you believe that they love you, that they're a trustable, responsible person, but then all of a sudden they lie about birth control, they hide a pregnancy, and then it's like we can get into this territory of like we cannot trust women because they can screw us over. And
well, you already made that argument with the turkey baster and all that stuff. So I mean, the fact is that both men and women can do evil things.
Yeah.
I just think it's completely crazy to tell a woman, you know, hey, this guy's not going to help you out if you decide you want to keep this baby. Like, that's, even though, you know, he helped you make it, like, that's one, reducing the incredible role that women have of carrying the baby. You know, that's, I think it's devaluing and insulting to women. And I hope any pro-choice or feminist listening can at least support me on that idea, that if you are cornering a woman like that, that's just, you know, I don't know how that's pro-choice. You're making the choice for her.
You look like you have a thought on that.
That's why I think it really depends on the situation. That's the part where it's like, I would have to, like, and I wish I couldn't say it, I just have to go by each individual situation when it presented itself.
Well, and that's why with the question, with the grab bag question we did a few episodes back, I was very reluctant to say that I agreed it should be illegal, except in the cases of mother's life, because I know that there's always going to be something, you know, and I always think there's going to be something that, you know, a doctor and a pregnant woman could figure out behind closed doors. And, you know, that's, you know, so there's always going to be, a case by case basis, but just when we're talking about things on a large scale and in general, you know, that's just, I mean, what I think about this financial abortion. Would there be some,
in your idea, Riley, where you do think that the financial abortion should be okay? Would there be, you said you would think that there should be regulations to it.
You know, I haven't had a whole lot of time to think about that. You know, it's unfortunate that that's the situation, that a man and a woman have 3 children together who are teenagers or whatever, and they decide to divorce, and whoever isn't the primary caretaker takes off and says, hey, I'm not going to pay for these children. That's a really unfortunate and shitty situation, and you'd hope that that wouldn't happen. And honestly, I just don't know what my thoughts are about that, because I remain on the idea that forcing that man to, or I'm stereotyping men, that they're runaway fathers, but
there are a lot.
I mean, yeah, there are generalizations for sure, and the stats show, but you know, I have a really hard time forcing that person to pay money and using tax dollars to enforce that. I don't think that's government's job, man. I think that that person needs to have a strong talking to by his family, being like, you need to man up and do this shit. But ultimately, I think that it should be his decision.
What about, let's take it into, see, my only argument would be like, okay, let's say you invested in this car together, and guys are doing payments together, and you are making sure that this car gets taken care of. I don't know why I'm comparing kids to a car, but okay.
No, yeah, that's
and then like suddenly someone says like, I actually don't want to pay for this car, and I'm just gonna get a motorcycle and head out. That's the only kind of problem I would have with it.
The thing about that is a car is a contract. You know, the same thing with an apartment complex. If I live with my girlfriend right now, if I decide I want to take off, my name is still on that lease for the rest of the year. and if I stop making payments on it, that hurts my credit. All of a sudden I can't get another apartment after that because they know the situation, and all of a sudden I fuck myself over by doing that. Same thing with a car. With a child, if they're gonna have children together, they can do like a prenup kind of situation where it's like, if we split after 10 years or so, you still have to pay me child support. That's a contract that they could enter into. And I know those conversations are hard to have in a relationship, but fuck, man, you got to have those conversations.
That should just be an automatic contract that if you have a kid together and you split, you both have to take care of it.
Yeah,
That's just automatic common sense. It's just and I get your thing about the laws and whatnot, but at some point you gotta stop and say, there's this common sense that people aren't going to use, so we have to have the court systems, because otherwise men are gonna, be making plenty of money to take care of themselves while the woman has the baby, or whatever the situation is, and you have to get the courts involved, because otherwise no family talking to is going to do it. The only thing that's going to do it is, and that's why ultimately we have to have some government, is because people have different disagreements, people have, different ways of doing things, and sometimes they don't make the right decisions, and so what society as a whole agrees is the right decision.
Well, hold on. I have a defense to this. What if the person who separates and doesn't keep the children, isn't interested in them, is the one who's less well off, Then the person, let's say the person who keeps the children is very wealthy. They're the one who made most of the income in the home. The person who splits off and doesn't want the children is fucking working at 7-Eleven or some shit.
Well, then part of their 7-Eleven check goes to their child.
See, I have a strong disagreement with that. The woman is, or I'm sorry, the person who is the primary caretaker is just fucking robbing that person, and they don't need that money.
I don't think they require it in that case. Doesn't it work just like alimony and divorce, where like whoever makes less gets a little bit of money?
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about alimony, and what we're talking about is theoretical. So obviously they'd set the laws, but what I'm saying is that is the situation where I would definitely be okay with the person who leaves not having to pay anything because the other person's well off. And I also think that the person who is the primary caretaker of the children, when the other person leaves and they're stuck with the kids, that's when they assess their situation and say, I need help from my family, I need help from my friends, or struggle being poor, or that's when they give up their children, or give them to their family to take care of, and they can still visit them and stuff. It's an unfortunate situation, but shitty situations happen all the time. Maybe if the guy turned out to be someone who was gonna take off halfway through raising the kids, that you should have done a better job choosing the man. I know it sounds harsh, but man, we live in a harsh fucking reality.
That is very true. We do live in a harsh reality.
All right, let's something else. Do you guys have any more thoughts on that idea?
I don't know.
I wanted to before we close up. Yeah. Before we close up, what about technology and abortion? There's some interesting stuff going on with raising babies outside of the womb, where they have artificial wombs. I think as it stands right now, it's a very expensive process, and it's not something that can just be casually done. But I think you can raise a baby outside the womb from like 8 weeks going forward. Mm-hmm. I don't have everything, all my facts checked on that one, but I think that's where science is at right now. If we get to the point where fucking as soon as conception happens, you take the fertilized egg out and you can raise it from there. What do you guys think about abortion in that case?
I mean, it's a good reason not to have one, I guess.
I think it would still remain the same.
Yeah, and I think we've discussed this privately before, and the fact is you can do anything you want to make it stop. Like, you can tell the woman, like, okay, we're going to take your conceived embryo, and we're going to take responsibility for it. You'll never have to see it, worry about it again. And there are still going to be people who argue for the pro-choice movement because it's now about the choice. I mean, I don't know how I feel about machines like conceiving babies. Eventually it'll probably not conceiving babies. You know what I mean? Nurturing them and whatnot. Eventually it's, probably going to be a reality. I don't know if it's going to help or hinder the situation. It could make things messier. I just imagine a room full of machines, all with a bunch of babies,
like the Matrix.
Yeah,
something like that. But one thing I would like to say is that, and my mom listens to a lot of these podcasts, and I'm not saying this against my mom.
Hi, Mom.
I love my mom, and I have no ill will towards her. Well, I do give her a lot of crap for this, but she had several appointments with Planned Parenthood for me, and her reasoning was because at the time she'd had a boy and a girl, and her life was set and where she wanted it to be. And so she had several appointments, and she canceled them. And the final one, her friend came up and said, "Sarah, get in the car. If you're gonna do this, let's do this. Come on, let's go." And she just said finally, like, I just can't, like, I'm not doing it. I can't do it. And I thank her for doing that with me, and for all of the other siblings, even the ones she had after me, after she had her 2 kids. And I was approached by somebody one time at a QFC or something, and a girl in a pink Planned Parenthood shirt said, "Hi, do you have time to talk to us if you support Planned Parenthood?" And I said, "I absolutely don't, because if my mom would have kept her appointments with you guys, I wouldn't be here right now." So that's not my whole reason for being, pro-choice, or even close to my whole reason. I mean, obviously I've had times in my life where I'm like, wish I was dead. Like, kind of, we've all had those, but in general, I mean, it's something where you don't get to see the outcome, and because you don't get to see the outcome, there is nothing there for you to feel as a loss. So
my personal take is actually that my opinion on the technology idea changed recently, because I read this study about, I think it was Chicago or something, but something about how all the kids in either the foster system or in the orphanage, something like 100 of them every day aged out of the foster system and the orphanage. That's in just one city.
Yeah.
And that's concerning to me. So even if, like, I love that technology offers us the idea that we can, if you don't want to have an abortion, if you created a child and you want to see it come to fruition, that is an idea, that is an option, and I fully support that. But I would still want abortion to remain legal and another option, because if you don't want a child, it's another child that enters the foster system and grows up without a family and ages out. And studies show that most of those kids who age out of the foster system and the orphanages end up homeless, drug addicted. And you brought up a really good point about, you've told me many times that we're just assuming what a child's life is going to be like. If a 13-year-old gets pregnant, I try not to do that. And I thank you for opening me up to that idea. But when the studies show that these kids aging out of this orphanage, the vast majority of them are ending up homeless, drug addicted, unhappy, that concerns me.
Well, it's also because there's not enough people for that. Like, I was in the foster system for a while before I got adopted, and it's actually extremely, extremely hard to get adopted. It isn't like this magical thing where it's so easy and you just go and you pick up a child. It's a lot, and so to put even more children through that, I think that's another huge factor that we talked about.
All those Christians who talk about like loving children and stuff, they would have to adopt a lot of kids, and you just don't see it happening.
No.
Well, usually the ones that do adopt are usually ones that run foster homes that are more than just for the money.
Yeah.
Or a lot of them are Christians, and a lot of just because some Christians don't do anything for the movement doesn't mean that none of them do. And I mean, I definitely agree that with me telling, me saying, we've determined their future, and then you look at the statistics and it's like, well, it's kind of right. I get what you're saying there. I guess my rebuttal would be like, so either we can, every time somebody ages out, we just take our machine guns and shoot those 100 kids,
Jesus
or
Christ.
what we can do is we can do better for them, you know. And of course that might require a little more government than Riley's happy with, but somebody eventually has to, you know, take responsibility for us doing better for people who were dealt bad set of cards.
All right. Well, any more ideas about the subject of the day?
I'd like to ask Margaret a question.
Okay.
Margaret, have us men conducted ourselves in a well-behaved fashion?
I mean, you guys are just average guys, so yeah, sure. I'm like, I don't know what this means.
And anything else from the main question of, you know, men having a say? And when I originally thought of it, I wasn't really thinking of like I guess I'm of course talking about it being legal because it is legal and that's how it's been. Mm-hmm. I'm just talking about men being part of protests either way, or men giving their opinion, men having their say.
Yeah, they can definitely give their say and give their opinion and all that. I mean, I don't want to suppress like someone just because of their gender to have an opinion. It would be like someone saying that I can't talk about, I don't know, what's something that guys go through that girls don't. I don't know.
I don't know. You guys got it rough.
So I think men should definitely have an opinion, and if they want to go to protest. Like nobody, I don't want to stop anyone from doing something that it's their legal right to do so. I think, but at the end of the day, push comes to shove, I think the final say when it comes to abortion should be the woman. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be her decision.
Well, and that's, I mean, regardless of what you believe, that's the truth of it, too, is at the end of the day, it is her decision as it stands, so.
Should we move into final word? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so final word is we just give our final statements on the topic, and we leave it at that. So my final word on the thought of the day is I am pro-choice because you know, I think I like small government. However, I do not support our taxes being used to pay for other people's abortions. I don't support that. But I also do think that men should have a say in the legality of abortion. But when it comes down to actually getting an abortion, I think that's a woman's decision on her own. How about you, Matt?
I am pro-life. I believe that life starts at conception, and I believe that men should have a say because men all started as a embryo and then a fetus, just the same way women did. And that is typically my rebuttal when a woman tells me I don't get to have a say in it. I say I do because, you know, it was part of my life process as well. And so as far as the argument goes, I believe that men should have a say either way. You know, I just think that's how things work with the world, is everybody gets a say. And on an individual basis, I think as much as I'm arguing for women to take responsibility, it would be very two-faced of me to say that men shouldn't have to take that responsibility and can opt out. And so I definitely think on an individual level, of course it's going to be her choice at the end of the day, but if she has it and you were there to make it, then you get to be there to support it too.
Margaret?
I am pro-choice. I think that men should have a say in the legality of abortion. However, I do think that they should not have a final say whether a woman decides to get an abortion or not. As for the other topic of financial abortion, I'm very much on the fence on it. I would have to do a little bit more reading about it. So I would say I'm right in the middle on that topic.
You want to do the outro, Matt?
No, you do it.
Okay. First, thank you, Margaret, for joining us.
Yeah,
we really
thanks for having
appreciate
me.
your input. You've done a wonderful job on the podcast, so thank you. Let me see. Thank you, everyone, to the listeners for listening. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends. We would appreciate that. That helps us a ton. Follow us on YouTube and SoundCloud. And you can send us an email if you want to have a comment on this. You can leave a comment in SoundCloud or YouTube, or send us an email. The email address is quadrant4politics@gmail.com. That's the number 4, not spelled out. And yeah, thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next one.